Hello, and welcome to Chad's ADHD 365 podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Takeda, Better Health, Brighter Future.
Hi, I'm your host, Susan Booning, and I'm here today with Kate Barrett to talk about strategies to help with treatment compliance. Kate, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm an ADHD coach. I've been coaching for about 8 years, and I work primarily with older students and parents. And during the pandemic, I've gotten into working with adults a lot more as well. I like to tell people I have kind of a Baskin Robbins of ADHD in my own house, which is how I came to coaching. And I have two of my 3 children have a formal diagnosis, and through that process, like so many of us, adults in the house were also diagnosed.
So we're going to be talking about transition age youth, but for parents to understand transition age youth. So what strategies can parents use for convincing their transition age youth, teens, college students, young adults, to stick with a treatment plan?
I think open communication is always the biggest benefit when you're working with a child that has ADHD. So the more you can co-create what those defined goals or aims are for the next stage of their life, that can be really important. And as each child gets a little bit older, it goes into the next stage, whether it's teenage years, college students, or they're graduating from college and going out into the working world, life and structures and support systems are going to change for them. And I think it's really important to sit and have a discussion with them. I found personally as a parent, I know a lot of the parents I work with have found that car time is really a great moment to have these conversations. When you've got them alone, they're captive, and they don't have to make eye contact with you. So sometimes you get a little more out of them in the car than you might otherwise. But for the most part, the sooner you can start having these conversations, I think the better the outcome will be for everyone. Even just asking them, what does a treatment plan look like for you? Or how do you define that? What does that mean to you? Because that may not be what they want to refer to a treatment plan is. Some students that I've worked with refer to it as this: I have a team. These are my people. This is my health plan, because they just don't like the word treatment, or they don't like the word plan, or whatever it might be. So helping them come up with those words can be really important. And then even asking them, what are you looking for in the next stage? What do you think your needs are going to be? How are things going to change for you? So they can actively start thinking about what might be a little different. You might hear a little bit more about what worries they might have related to the treatment plan, or just related to that next stage in life, that might give you clues in terms of what tweaks might need to be made, or what information they may be seeking as they go to the next stage. And I think it's also important, if you've got a teen or a college student, data becomes really important, because often, you might hit a stage where your child may say, I don't need my doctors anymore. I don't need my medication. I don't need this planner. I don't need any alarms, whatever it might be. I've got it. The confidence is there, but the foresight in terms of what that next stage looks like is not always complete. So giving them some data behind what's working and figuring out what the next stage might look like to translate that particular strategy or treatment component can be really important.
I so agree with you about car time. But let's talk about treatment resistance or outright refusal for a minute. What is the best way for a parent to support their teen or young adult through a period when they reject their diagnosis or treatment completely?
I think this one's really hard as a parent to watch or participate in, because you want to solve everything, right? Like, that's our first go-to as parents. How can I solve this for you? How can I make the best plan for you, or that I think is the best plan for you? Often, I think all of us have hit some sort of suggestion or strategy that doesn't quite land well with our kids. And inevitably, at some point, there's resistance that comes about. And sometimes there's value in letting them explore that on their own. I could share a personal story of mine. My son, when he hit high school, hit a resistance period and said, I don't I don't think I need medication anymore. Where I'm going to a smaller school now. I have shorter class periods. I think I've got the systems I need. I would like to try not using medication. And as hard as it was to just let him go through this, I was willing to let him figure it out and walk with him in it. So we actually came up with a plan to track measurable results. So something that was concrete, that wasn't tied to my emotions or his. What do your grades look like? How often are you late to class? Are you showing up in the way that you need to be showing up? Are you writing the papers? Are you turning things in on time? What are you able to do off medication that you couldn't do, or that you couldn't do before without medication? And as they develop and grow, there are some things that they'll be able to do without, certain components of their treatment plans. But I think, again, it goes back to that collaboration and that conversation, and then creating a concrete timeline for those measurable results that you're tracking with them, so that you can set a time to come back and review. So in my own personal case, it was a 6-week interval. So we went through like a grading period. Let's see what it looks like. And we went period by period. And then he finally reached a point within his academic career where the stress point was too high and he couldn't manage his symptoms on his own anymore. So we had to revisit that. But he was 110% in at that point, and he had built up the skills to self-advocate for himself and ask for what he needed and have a really beautiful conversation with his prescriber. 13, 14, he was okay about that. But at 16, he was absolutely able to tell his prescriber, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is what I need. This is where my challenges are. And this is where I think I'm okay. And through that, they could collaborate together and co-create that new version of a treatment plan for him going forward. I think that was really important. So there are other things that'll work. Like some parents have success with contracts. Can we just, let's try this out. If your child's resistant, sometimes they can be a little more compliant or willing to explore or stick with a treatment plan through a contract. We've actually used a reverse contract with one of my children before. And I have several clients that have used that with success, where you actually give them the thing they want first, and they have to maintain the tenets of the contract in order to hold on to that coveted item or time or whatever it might be. In my child's case, he's a baseball player. So we created a contract that had 3 strikes, and he had to earn it back by running the bases, effectively doing extra things around the house. And he never got to that point. But we did learn just how creative and crafty he is. And a strength actually came out of it. Like, wow, we really didn't anticipate how clever he was in terms of working around the terms of the contract. So there are some, pitfalls and things that you might need to experiment with, things like contracts. But when they choose to take a break, and if your child is taking medication, I think it's also really important that if that's a road that you want to explore with them or want to let them explore, it's incredibly important to make sure that you are in contact with a prescriber and having that conversation with a medical professional. And I think it's really helpful for them to have that conversation, not just you as the parent, because this is their treatment plan. This is their moment. And this is, they're the ones that need to become more invested in what they want their future to look like. And those are members of their team, whether it's a psychiatrist or a general practitioner or a pediatrician, whoever it is that's working on the medication piece. And if they have a therapist, I think it's helpful to talk to their therapist or a coach. For example, I've had lots of conversations with my high school students that I work with related to this topic, and preparing them to have that conversation with their prescriber. What do I say? There's that hesitancy, like, I don't really know what I want, and sitting with your kid and giving them that moment to breathe and really think big picture, I think can be really helpful. And it's a great way to help them practice some of those executive functions that they often are lacking.
Now, what if something in the treatment plan is not working? What can a parent do if they notice symptoms are a problem, but the teen or young adult either is not noticing or doesn't want to discuss it?
That's a tough one sometimes. When you have a child that maybe doesn't notice, but they're open to the conversation, that's a little bit easier because you can always bring that information. This is what I'm noticing, or this is what I'm observing. What are you feeling? What are you seeing? What do you think about that? So then if they're open to have that conversation, it's a much easier road. And then figuring, okay, what should we do about it together? What do you want to do? Do you want to brainstorm about this? Sometimes they don't know what the answer is, particularly if they're not aware. And often as a parent, you can bring some conversation and suggestions to the table. They may not like all of them. They may not be responsive to all of them, but starting that conversation is really where the first steps come in. If you've got a child that doesn't want to have a conversation about it, it's a little bit more difficult. I think sometimes, depending on the age of your child, if you have a working relationship with their team members and you have the ability to have conversations with their team members, you can share your observations and concerns with them. And I'm a big advocate of letting your child know, hey, by the way, I'd really like to let your doctor know. I'd really like to have a conversation with your doctor about this. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just overreacting or overzealous or super worried. Maybe it's nothing, but I need to talk to somebody to help work through what I'm feeling and what I'm noticing. But again, it goes back to that data collection. What exactly are you noticing? What are the specific changes in the dynamics that are shifting that you're seeing? Because that's what your prescriber is going to need to know. If there is a problem or there's changes and the treatment plan isn't working, talking to those specialists that are working with your child or helping them have that conversation with them can become really important. Again, you're helping them practice self-advocacy. And you're also being a proactive partner with them. So again, it comes back to that collaboration. I'm where you can use your I language. I'm scared, or I'm worried, or it's me. It's my problem. It's not necessarily theirs. That's where a lot of the resistance is. Stop trying to fix me. Stop trying to tell me what to do, or you can't tell me what to do. I'm 24. So there could be moments where that comes into play, and resistance. Our kids are an important part of the team, and I think it's really a hallmark of helping them develop those skill sets, and that the maturity for them to be able to manage themselves is including them as early as possible in the thoughts and in the conversations and in the education, because I think it makes it easier down the road when things do feel like they're falling off the rails. You can start those conversations a little bit easier.
So how can a parent encourage their teen or young adult to come to them and talk to them when there's an issue with their treatment?
That's a really great question, Susan. I think open discussions are such a big asset in a relationship, particularly with a child that has ADHD, because so often they're not noticing right away what's not working. And when you have a child that comes to you and says, I am noticing something, that's a big one. That's a huge step in self-management, in actualization, in awareness for our kids. And starting those conversations openly and even on a regular basis, just even when things are, quote unquote normal or seem to be running smoothly, having those regular conversations, whether it's at dinner or again in the car, or maybe it's, a weekend, breakfast conversation. Hey, tell me how your week's going, or tell me what life is like for you right now. And noticing and telling them what you're noticing, particularly the things that are working. Our kids need positive feedback, and the more positive feedback that we can provide to them and share with them, the more likely they're going to open up to us, because they hear enough negative feedback in the world as it is. And I think that's really the biggest piece. And shifting our language even just a little bit, in terms of just really, I tell my parents, you're putting on your detective hat. It's time to get curious. So really just asking our kids, how are you feeling? What is going on? You want open-ended questions. You don't want the yes or the no or the why or the I don't know, because that's not going to give anybody information. You want to know how something might be impacting them, or what was their favorite part of the week, or what do they feel like they're really knocking out of the park right now, and what's their biggest challenge. And again, that gets them into thinking of what they want for their future self as well. So I think that's really important. I think the connection overall becomes your biggest strength within the relationship.
What options are available for teens and young adults who want to comply with treatment but have trouble remembering to take their medications if they're taking it on their own?
Mhm.
Utilize other aspects of their treatment plan. Are there devices, apps, strategies? What kinds of things are available for them?
Oh my gosh, there are so many options out there. It can feel overwhelming. A lot of people with ADHD can become easily overwhelmed by all of the tools, the strategies, and the apps. There really is an app for everything. There are gadgets, including like pill minders or tracking reminders that you can screw onto your prescription bottle tops, which will tell you when you last opened the top. There are apps that will remind you to take your medication. You could set alarms. You could put sticky notes somewhere that you want to be reminded when you walk in to take your medication. And those, FYI, might need to be changed every once in a while because they're going to lose their novelty at some point. You're not going to pay attention to the blue sticky note after maybe a day, maybe a week. Maybe you have to move it to a different location. Maybe you change it to pink, whatever it might be. If you're a sticky note person, my clients that use sticky notes, and I'm a big sticky note person myself, but moving them around creates that novelty that the ADHD brain will respond to a little bit more easily. There's a great app that a lot of my clients have started using in the last year called I Can't Wake Up. And I think the equivalent for the iPhone is Alarmy. I have clients that are using it to create an actual morning routine. And so they're actually utilizing the scanning feature of the app. So the alarm would go off and they need to get up and go to the place where they need to take their medication, or go to the bathroom to brush their teeth, or go to the front hallway to pick up their briefcase before they leave. So a lot of, I have one client who literally established an entire morning routine by creating these alarms and anticipating when he was going to fall off track. He said, I know that I'm going to go into the bathroom and brush my teeth. And because I have my phone on with me everywhere, I'm going to get lost, on a YouTube video or something. So I set another one for 15 minutes after that alarm that's going to remind me to go take my medication. And I have to scan my pill bottle. And then I'm holding my pill bottle in my hand. So obviously that's going to help me remember, I need to take these. And so he created his own system in that way, which has been really helpful. You can utilize smartwatches. There are lots of, you can use a silent alarm. You could have an audible alarm. You could have a vibrating alarm. So if you don't want the noise, or if you need the noise, you have different options. I think that's the one thing I do like about technology. For younger students, or those that are living at home, sometimes parental support is still a really nice piece of the team to have underneath you. So I have some students in high school whose parents will wake them up a half an hour before they really need to get out of bed so that they can take their medication. They roll over and they get up and they, go about their day. And a lot of what their practice has become was, I like the method, I like the strategy, I'd like to try and do it on my own. And so they're utilizing alarms in combination on their own, and then mom and dad become the backup just in case. So there's ways that parents can be involved. If you've got a child going into a physical school building, school nurses for public schools, or some private schools that do have school nurses wherever they need to go to that someone that can hold their medication for them if they need to take it during the day, they can also become really important. And then I think the biggest thing that I've seen with kids is working on point of performance, and that is effectively your personal GPS for getting things done. It's that reminder. How do I remind myself when I get to this place or set myself up for success? So am I taking my medication at bedtime, or when I wake up, do I want it on my bedside table? If so, how do I set my bedside table up so that when I wake up, the first thing I'm reminded to do is to take my medication? Is it in the bathroom counter? Is it in a kitchen cabinet? Can you attach it to another habit? So that's a strategy called habit stacking. And so if there's something you're already doing on a regular, continuous basis, so let's take brushing your teeth, for example. If I brush my teeth and I want to take my medication before or after I brush my teeth every morning, where do I set it such that in the act of coming to brush my teeth, I am reminded that I need to take my medication? So again, it could be a sticky note. Some people have used, they've written on their mirror. Again, you can use alarms. Sometimes it's just visually seeing everything. So I know some people like to tuck all things away. And a lot of us parents like to tuck things away into cabinets and things of that nature. But if having it out is important for our kids, then that might be one strategy to use. It's also one that might shift when they go to college, if they're living with roommates. That's when you need to have that conversation around medication and securing your medication and who's going to be in your environment. And it's an awful conversation to have as a parent, to think of that worst case. But I think it's really important to get our kids thinking in that mindset, because it can be an issue when they go away to college, that there are some kids that might find that medication really interesting. And as we all know, if they're on a stimulant, someone lifts their medication or takes a pill or two without their knowledge, they don't get them easily replaced. So I think it's an important conversation to have at that next stage.
Thank you. You've shared a lot of excellent, useful information. Is there anything else you'd like to say to parents to help them with this issue?
I think it's always important to remember as a parent that one of the hallmarks of ADHD is that our kids are going to be consistently inconsistent. And they may have the greatest intentions, but every once in a while, things may fall off the rails. And really creating the collaboration and communication with your child so that when things do fall off the rails, you can build some resilience and help them figure out, okay, that didn't work. What's my plan B? Or what's my next step? How do I do this differently the next time? Or if something changes, what might I need to think about that isn't working right now? Our kids they're often not as skilled at self-regulation as we might anticipate or expect for their chronological age. So really going back to that question of where are they developmentally right now? Because our kids are often delayed, and when in the older years, it may be 3 to 5 years behind their peers. So they may be behaving like a freshman in high school when they're a junior or a senior. When they're in college, they're still developing that prefrontal cortex all the way beyond most of them graduating college if they graduate within 4 years. So those mid-20s, that's when we start to see a lot of that maturation come to fruition in the later stages of executive function. So our kids may still need us, and they may just need us to have conversation with and to brainstorm with, and also to help to point things out and make those observations. So I think while change is inevitable, as our kids gain more independence, it's natural that they'll want to take more control over that treatment plan, and helping them pave the way as soon as possible to start thinking about those components and what a treatment plan looks like and what they want in their future and what they need becomes really important, because there can be changes in structure and circumstance. There can be change in cognitive demand. And then skill development encompasses and supports all of those. So at the end of the day, that's what we want, is we want to help our kids build the skills they need to become independent humans.
Thank you, Kate, so much. I think this will be so helpful to parents who are navigating this tricky transition years.
I'm happy to be here today, Susan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
This podcast was sponsored by Takeda, better health, brighter future. Thank you for listening to another episode of Chad's ADHD 365 podcast.